Good evening. I would like to call to order the March 19th, 2018 Lake Washington School Board meeting. And to begin, I will entertain a motion to approve the March 19th agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I would like to first entertain any discussion around it.
I'd like to have two items pulled from the consent agenda, please. And as soon as I come to the page, I'll tell you which ones. The value engineering report on Peter Kirk and the value engineering report on Margaret Mead. And I just have a few questions I'd like to just for clarification on the joint use agreement too.
So on tab 4, joint use agreement.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, so we will just put those then at the top of the non-consent agenda.
It'd be quick.
Is that fine? All right, so I will now entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Move approval.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director LaLiberty that we approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And so to begin this evening, we would like to have a proclamation on safety in our schools. There has been a lot of discussion around security. Our board meeting last, we did a discussion around that with the superintendent. And there's been a lot of community comments, and we as a board would like to make clear sort of what our position is as well. So a proclamation of the Board of Directors of the Lake Washington School District, number 414, King County, Washington, supporting school safety for students, staff, and community. Whereas the Board of Directors grieves with the school communities across the nation when violent events occur, some of which have happened in our own state, and whereas the Board of Directors recognizes that potential gun violence presents a continuing danger to our school staff and students, and whereas the Board of Directors believes that teachers and staff should be focused on educating students and supporting their academic and social-emotional learning needs, therefore, we, the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, affirm Lake Washington's ongoing commitment to implement multifaceted safety-focused approaches, policies, and practices designed to increase staff and student safety, support the efforts of our local communities and jurisdictions to protect our children from gun violence, commit to working in collaboration with our cities and neighboring municipalities to ensure that our representatives at the state and federal levels understand the urgency of protecting our staff and students from gun violence, and call upon the Washington State Legislature and the United States Congress to enact legislation that effectively regulates access to firearms in the interests of school safety, funds physical improvements needed to prevent unwanted access to our schools and campuses, and funds comprehensive social, emotional, and mental health services for students and increased protections and access to law enforcement resources to support and protect students and staff. This is approved by the Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District, number 414, King County, Washington, in a regular meeting, therefore held on the 19th day of March, 2018. Thank you.
Okay.
According to my agenda. All right, now we have the consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Carlson. Dr. Pierce, will you poll the board?
Cassandra?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Siri?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Pierce, would you please review the donations?
Yes, if you turn to tab 9, we have 3 very generous donations this evening. A $6,000 donation from the Alexander Graham Bell PTSA to Bell Elementary to support field trips. A $2,200 donation from Finn Hill Middle School PTSA to Finn Hill Middle School to support field day. And a $12,400 donation from Wendy and John Evans to Redmond High School to purchase bleachers for the tennis courts. So all total $20,600 in donations this evening.
All right, thank you very much, and we'd like to personally thank everyone who's chosen to support our students in schools. We appreciate your generosity. Okay, now we will move on to the non-consent agenda, and we'll start with the 3 items that were pulled from the consent agenda, beginning with the joint use agreement and lease agreement.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, could we, since the other 2 are basically the same, they're both the same topic. My desire for pulling tab, make sure I got the right one, 6 and 7, was the idea that there's been a lot of comment in the community about the way we're spending our money on construction projects. And I think that these projects and the items that are reported there demonstrate how well we are being good stewards of their money and saving money and working to make sure that the savings aren't on the backs of the students. The savings are actually efficiencies. They are not cutting any corners. But at the same time, we're reducing our costs as much as possible and trying to keep a very lean budget. And I think the only reason I pull this because I want everyone to realize how much we are actually saving. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could maybe go over just a couple of the bottom line type things that we're saving, it just kind of, it irks me when I see a report like this and we bury it.
So to just clarify, though, these are the value engineering report for Peter
Yes.
Kirk Elementary and for Margaret Mead Elementary that's being referenced, so anybody who's looking can know. And so if you would go ahead and take that, Dr. Pierce, thank you.
And so, as Siri just mentioned, both the Peter Kirk Elementary Rebuild and Enlarge project and the Margaret Mead Elementary Rebuild and Enlarge project value engineering reports are part of the consent agenda this evening. So I won't read the whole situation recommendation, but I will highlight the piece that Mark's speaking to, and then if there's specific questions around the detail, we do have both Barbara and Forrest here who can help speak to those things. But if you turn to tab 6 on the Peter Kirk project, design team and district staff review proposals and determine the viability of construction-related proposals as part of the value engineering process. And of the 20 construction-related proposals, we're recommending that the board accept 3 and accept another 7 with modifications. Those 3, plus the additional 7 recommendations, total a savings of $1,980,476. And so that's the piece that I believe you wanted to ensure that we.
It's not chump change.
That's correct. So these 10 recommendations totaling almost $2 million, it's a significant amount of savings. And so if, and then for Margaret Mead, similarly, there are 8 total recommendations recommended that the board accept, totaling 1.3 million and some change. So 1,300,876. So those are the 2 things that I think you're really wanting to make sure that we're having a chance to highlight tonight. And if you have any particular questions about the specifics behind those, I would invite you to ask those questions, and we can have Barbara or Forrest speak in any more detail if you like.
Now, I thought both reports, brief as they are, were good and very informative. And it's just the idea that so many people in our community have accused us in the past of building Taj Mahals or things that are they're over the top. And this shows that in projects that we are very careful with their money. We are making sure that these projects also are going to have good environmental health for our students and our staff and safety. But at the same time, we're keeping a very sharp pencil, and we've got some great folks overseeing this project. And I just want everyone to realize it. And for that matter, that's the only reason I had them pulled, and I would move to have them both adopted.
Do I hear a second?
Yeah. Second.
Is there any further discussion?
I'd just like to add that going forward, if we could sort of keep track of these savings, I think that's an important thing to stay on top of.
Just one comment on that. So You're correct. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into looking at how we can avoid costs and use money responsibly. And so both in the design phase, there's cost avoidance strategies that the Design Construction Advisory Committee, who works directly with Forest, they help to recommend and we implement. And then in the value engineering process, so throughout each sort of phase of the construction, we're looking to how we can keep costs down. And so we can certainly, by phase and project, have, develop a document where all that data is all in one place. So it's easy for the board and the community to see the costs that have been avoided or saved throughout the process.
And given the amount of possible costs that are going to be increasing over time as labor is short in the market because of all the building and also because of the tariffs on steel and so forth and aluminum, I think that it's the point that we've made cost savings because we know there's likely to be some extra costs added by things we just can't control.
Any additional conversation? Okay. It has been moved by Director Stewart and seconded by Director La Liberty that we approve both the value engineering report for Peter Kirk and Margaret Mead. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, now we will move to the joint use agreement and lease agreement portion of Old Redmond Schoolhouse, City of Redmond.
I was looking in the report and couldn't find, and I'm sure it's in some other report, but heavens knows, me going through our system is not exactly the best thing of me to do because God knows my abilities with the computer are limited. But that said, in all seriousness, I was trying to remember how much of the building was going to be used by the city, continue to be used by the city, as opposed to our needs. And the reason I'm asking is because I think that because of the central location, the transportation hub that it is near when you get down to it, this would be a perfect place, if at all possible, we could explore the idea of having the transition academies, 1 and 2, relocated there. With the idea being that you've got a central transportation system, makes it easier for those students to get to work jobs that we're trying to place them in. It also puts them closer to be quite frank, to all the employers. Kamaikan is a great school, but to have kids that are special needs kids in a portable that has no plumbing facilities, no changing facilities, and is a good 50 yards from the door, and God knows how far from the bathroom, is not a good idea. I'll put it as nicely as I can. And I would love to see us try and explore that, plus the rent we'd save on the other facility.
Are there any discussions on the actual interlocal agreement in and of itself as presented at this
I was
point
just
in
asking
time?
questions.
No, absolutely. So I'm just checking. I'd like to be able to move this through and make sure, and that's something we could put on as something to be touched on at a point in time in which to hold that discussion. So what I would ask, is there any further questions on the joint use agreement or any concerns within that?
No, I move for its adoption. I just had questions.
Okay, and a second?
Yeah, second.
All right, it has been moved by Director Stewart and seconded by Director La Liberty that we approve the joint use agreement and lease agreement for the Old Redmond Schoolhouse, City of Redmond. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. I would also like just to continue with this. This is exciting. It's been a lot of work. Thank you, staff, for putting this together. There's been a lot of work on both the City of Redmond and on the school district side to really put together a solid joint use agreement, which will set the stage for years to come. So it's very exciting. It's some of the additional work we've done as a city, working on our city relations. All right. So then we will go to our next item on the non-consent agenda, which will be,
Could I ask a quick clarifying
Yeah.
question before you move on? So in terms of the questions Mark posed, we can follow up on that
Yeah,
and let
that's
you
fine.
know what the plan is to date in terms of the use of the building. And I know that issue of location of the second Transition Academy or Transition Academy 2, being at Kamiakin was something that was discussed at the study session on special education last time, so we can follow up on
When I read the
that.
report, it triggered the thought of Kamiakin and the TA2, and perhaps the idea if you had TA1 in the same location, you're not paying rent. Just a thought.
So we'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question about our preschool programs. Looking at the map, and I'm sorry, but my computer does not show me the tabs, or I would tell you what tab it is. But looking at the map of the Old Redmond Schoolhouse, are we going to be utilizing the first floor or the second floor? First floor?
Would it be helpful at this point for Barbara to come up and answer any specific questions? Do you want us to do that now?
Sure,
Okay.
go ahead.
And yeah, just as Barbara is approaching the podium here, she's done a fabulous job, she and her team, working with the city on all the detail about this. So Barbara can answer the specifics.
Thank you. That's a good question. The drawing that we included in the packet is only the first floor, but because that's the portion that the City of Redmond will lease, but the preschool program will occupy both the first and the second floor. So it's 10 classrooms on 2 floors that they will occupy.
Okay, I just wanted to put out a thought that for our SNAPS preschool, for our special needs students, to consider the first floor. It might be a little bit easier on them. Thank you.
All right.
Excellent, okay. I think that's it. Any other further questions for?
Oh, it would be
Barbara?
great, Barbara, if you could, if there's usually I deal very well in black and white, but this is, I can't tell beans. Could we, if you could just email us copies of the floor plans? There is? Okay, if you could just send me the link for both the first and second floors, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. Okay, and now we will move on to item number 3 on our non-consent agenda, and that is the approval of the monitoring rope for ER3, interdisciplinary skills and attributes. Dr. Pierce?
Great, so the situation recommendation is found in tab 10, and of course, this is the 4th ER report following this format. So this was our first time attempting to do a formalized report for ER3, interdisciplinary skills and attributes. You have the full situation recommendation in front of you. The board so essentially the recommendation is that the board approves the monitoring report and the assertion of progress and exception form for ER3 interdisciplinary skills and attributes as presented.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve, and then we'll do discussion once we have the motion on the table.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Carlson, seconded by Director Stewart to approve the ER3 summary document, assertion of progress. I'll open the table for discussion. If I could take the opportunity, what I'd like to do is give an idea when Director LaLiberty did the monumentous task of working to try to summarize those comments that took place. And as this was the first time that we were really dealing with ER3 from the interdisciplinary skills, it was definitely a challenge with those conversations and some of the things we've talked about of reasonable interpretation and the indicators and making sure those all tie. So if you look at the report as put forward by Director LaLiberty, we're saying this is a very difficult thing to do and there's more work to be done in order for us to really be able to do this effectively. Is that sort of a fair summary?
Yeah.
And that our next steps would really be to do that work. And that would be the work plan going forward to further that this was a good stepping point, but there's not a lot of focus or direction we can provide at this point overall. But gives us a starting plane to think about how we do the connection between. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just to add on, the we there, a large part of that is the board. I mean, it's the work of the board to determine what we need to determine what reasonable progress looks like and how we need to determine what indicators tie in. This is not staff work to make that next step. We have to take the time, make sure it's on our work plan to do it.
Any further, you look like you have a question, Director
Well, no,
Carlson.
actually, it's not so much a question. I actually wanted to commend Director LaLiberty for taking a first crack at something that is, it's a challenge. So I know that these are probably not the easiest 2.5 pages you've written in the last few months, because they synthesize so much. And I just wanted to say that I broadly agree that in order to, we're behind the others. Where in the other ERs, we've got some defined metrics. We're really looking at defining what's assertions of progress that are reasonable. Here it's more a matter of let's figure out how we're going to measure progress and not worry about whether it's reasonable progress just yet. And what we received was a good, from staff and from Dr. Pierce, was a good first pass at what can we measure that does speak to what we set out there as aspirational goals in this space. So I'm generally quite supportive of where we're at. I think that it really is something where this year it's more about saying, okay, we liked that indicator, we didn't like that indicator, and getting it to the point where we might be able to start deciding whether it was reasonable progress in the future. So, although there were a couple of things that were on my wish list, they weren't things that were either easy to measure or, for that matter, I don't think they were in the existing database. They were things that might be able to be grabbed in the future. So there are things that might be augmenting that with time. I don't think that we necessarily would only be using the metrics that are currently in here as other possibilities come online. But all of that said, this has been a tremendously challenging experience because the first step in anything is to define the problem. I think we've got our heads around what's inside of ER3, what can we measure. Now it's the next step where you start trying to say, how are we going to approach the problem rather than what are the answers. And so anyway, I'm happy with where this is at. And again, I wanted to thank Eric. It's a lot easier to write when you already know the framework for evaluation on the other subjects that we've been evaluating for many years. So, and actually, the one big one, I also want to always pull out the trend that we're seeing towards less exclusionary discipline. Highly supportive.
Any other comments? So in looking at that, my thought would be the next step, it's the reasonable interpretation component that isn't quite clear and agreed upon in which to go forward with. So that would be the next step we would tackle in which to go forward. That's part of that indicator piece, but as well as it's sort of the overarching piece. And once that's done, then I think the rest will fall out. So we'll plan to have that onto the work plan for the upcoming year.
Okay, perfect.
So any further discussion? No? Okay. So with that, we have a motion on the table to approve ER3 as presented. And so all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Excellent. And again, thank you for your work in starting. It is a very good start. We just have to do a better connection of how this plays out into the outcome. It's not quite there yet. So next we will move to the program reports. And so Dr. Pierce.
Great. So these were actually on the agenda at our last board meeting, but we had so many things on the agenda that we moved these two program reports to this evening. So we've got two 10-minute brief presentations just to provide the board and the community with an update in terms of our work in culture and the arts and in information and communication technology. So these non-ER areas that are important parts of our student profile and important aspects of our curriculum. And so we do like to do an annual program report on these, even though it's not part of a formal ER report. So Michael, take the lead on both of these. You'll notice the first 3 slides in both presentations are just a real brief connection between the area in the end result and the EL. But we'll get right into the meat of the presentation. So welcome, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll start with culture and the arts. And unlike some of our other program presentations where the area might be encapsulated in a single subject area, culture and the arts really is covered in a number of areas. Both visual and performing arts, as well as social studies includes some of the culture. Visual and performing arts also includes culture, but you'll see, which is really what we want, to have content cutting across disciplines. As we look at our student profile, we get a definition of what we mean by culture and the arts. So I talked about some of the concepts of visual and performing arts. Communication is an important part of culture and the arts. And then the role of religion and philosophies and world events and cultures, sometimes expressed through arts, sometimes expressed through written language, but really that's the underlying idea when we're thinking about culture. So one thing to note as we're talking about the arts in Washington State, we have new art standards that were adopted in 2017. These are based off of a set of national standards and replace our 2014 standards. They include specifically media arts and 4 disciplines. And so as I show you some examples of these, you should see examples of these disciplines in the standards. So creating, performing, responding, and connecting. So it's really thinking about the arts in a more integrated, holistic way. So as you look at some of the examples of arts in our standards, and I mentioned we have visual and performing arts, you can see some of those core ideas or those core strands that we were talking about. So for example, in music, students are performing, but also analyzing the work, interpreting it, and using it as a way to present ideas or to communicate. In visual arts, again, they're looking at ways to synthesize ideas and bring ideas together and then make personal connections to the arts. In dance, we're looking at ways to communicate and generate and conceptualize ideas. In theater, relating. So you can see there's lots of those 4 strands in each of these. In all of the grade levels and all of the different types of arts across disciplines. You can also see this in terms of the idea of communicating artistically and how students use the arts to relay ideas and meaning in the world. And then going over to culture and culture in the arts, you can see culture in our visual arts when they're talking about societal, cultural, historical ideas and concepts and making connections between those. And arts are a way that we communicate culture in our world, but also see it in other subject areas, as I mentioned earlier. So for example, in social studies, very specific mentions of cultures in grades 4 through 12, and the role of religion in culture and civilization. And then also in civics, you'll see culture as expressed through guiding documents in ways that we work through our laws and government, system of government. So more specifically in our grade levels in our schools, you'll see culture and the arts at elementary. As you know, recently we adopted visual arts curriculum. We also have music programs in all of our elementary schools. And then we have many of our students, this is the most recent number, almost 2,000 students participating in 4th and 5th grade band and orchestra in our schools, so a real testament to the quality of our programs. As we move into the curriculum materials, we have some really great resources to support our teachers as they implement the arts. So we have text and recorded music that teachers can use for our music programs. As we mentioned, we just adopted our visual arts materials, and so those are being used in our classrooms this year and will be used more completely next year, so we're phasing in those resources. And then we also have wonderful social studies curriculum that incorporates culture and the arts, and so those are all resources that teachers can draw from as they implement the curriculum across our K-5 program. And then we have guiding resources and tools that help them to put all that together and make sense of it through our curriculum alignment guides and proficiency scales, which describe levels of performance. We also have some wonderful after-school programs through our PTSAs and schools themselves. And so in the performing arts, we have plays and drama clubs and musical productions that are amazing at many of our schools, piano and choir programs as well, and then visual arts programs, art clubs, drawing, cartooning, clay, where kids really get to take the core that they get in the elementary programs and expand on it and extend it. So what a wonderful partnership we have in our elementary schools. And then really one of the ones that's the strongest partnership in terms of supporting the arts is our visual arts community docent programs. And if you recall, when we were sharing the adoption recommendation for visual arts, we had some of our docents here talking about the connections between our core visual arts program in the schools and the wonderful experiences our kids are getting at the majority of our schools through our docent programs. Then as a part of that and a connection to that visual arts adoption and the partnership with our docents, what we're working on now is creating resources for docents in any school to have access to so that they can, if they need to, refer to those. Those resources are lessons that any docent can pick up and use. They're based on docent lessons that are currently in our schools. And so this might be for an emerging docent program or a docent program where we're handing off to a new person who's in charge. And so those are being developed and are now on our website, and within the next year or so we anticipate we'll have K-5 lessons for many of the different features that are in our art program and that also extend our art program. Then as we move to middle school, we do start to get more content specific. So we have some wonderful programs in the arts through electives. We have, as I mentioned, social studies and English language arts also incorporates culture in the arts. And then again, as with elementary school, we make sure that our teachers have exceptional resources that they can use to deliver curriculum and instruction in, as I mentioned, both social studies and ELA, as well as our electives, and resources that help teachers think about the sequence and the scope and how to assess. And as you'll see in high school as well, wonderful elective programs in elective courses in our schools, both in visual and performing arts, where kids get opportunities to go more deeply into the arts and really kind of look for their passions or experiences, or to get maybe develop their interest as they learn about the world. And so this really can be kind of a leaping off point to arts opportunities and pathways for our students. As we move to high school, again, we take that wonderful foundation that was built in elementary school and then expanded in middle school, and now in high school, lots of opportunities and experiences, both as part of our core curriculum as well as our arts program. So for the arts, we have 2 credits required for the class of 2019, social studies requirements and English language arts requirements. Those are requirements, but within those, there are many options for kids. In addition, we have wonderful, as before, resources that teachers draw from for all of those areas, and standards and novels that support our instruction. And then as with middle school, just some really wonderful electives in our schools for visual performing arts, as well as social studies and English language arts, really opportunities for kids to explore their passions and interests. The 7-period day, I believe, is going to open up opportunities for more kids to access these great programs. And so they're there and they're being developed, and they're just fabulous for our students. So that's culture and the arts in our schools. Before we go on, were there questions? Do we want to, or just move on to the next?
I think this is fantastic, having spent over a decade as an art in a PTA role in an elementary school where we were desperately trying to get art into the curriculum. It's a wonderful turnaround to see that we have so many opportunities available to us. And I've been working with the Kirkland Arts Center, and they have reached out to a couple of our highest rate of free and reduced lunch elementary schools in Kirkland to offer some additional after-school art. So their curriculum is almost finished being put together, and I think it's fantastic that we can partner with the community and bring even more opportunities to the kids.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Can board members sign up for some of those classes?
There-
The mystery reading class, I'd love
Yes, there's some great ones, aren't there? Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to information and communication technology. And again, this is another area that cuts across academic disciplines, and that really is one of those areas that our students, as with all areas, need to be successful and future ready. So as we look at our student profile to define what we mean by information and communication technology, this is really those core competencies of being able to understand and communicate and kind of make sense of the world through media and information that's available in print and digital form. It's really looking at the relationships between technology and productivity and quality of life, which is just blooming. You know, when we were all in high school, that wasn't, I mean, it was just starting. The world has changed, and it changes even more rapidly now. We also want our kids to be able to make use of technology to present and communicate their ideas and think about different types of audiences. And again, this is part of our lives now, and it will be part of our children's lives. When we think about how do we put all this together and conceptualize it into a way that makes sense for our students and teachers, as with all of our core content areas, we think about standards to define the what, and the proficiency scales to describe levels of competency and proficiency, and then we bring all that together in a skills continuum that lays out by grade level kind of progressions of skills and concepts and ideas around information and communication technology. So these are resources that our teachers have in all content areas to think about how do I integrate these skills and concepts into my course. They really should be. If you think about any content area now, there's an information communication technology component in our world, whether you're in career or in academia or day-to-day life. And so we want our teachers to be thinking about it that way too, not as a separate standalone topic, but really integrated into our courses. And so some examples of what these look like. For example, there's some connections to the social component. So we want kids to be able to understand what cyberbullying looks like, which again is another way that we make our schools safe. And there's, again, a technology component to that. So knowing about the best ways and the most appropriate ways to use technology. That's not just in school, but that's in work and in life. Also thinking about research and citation. Kids will need to be going out and thinking about what is quality information, how do I make use of it, how do I discriminate between information that's maybe valid and reliable and information that maybe hasn't been checked or screened or gone through the same vetting process. And so that's a skill that will serve our kids well, particularly as more information becomes available to them as they get older. Thinking about the ways that we communicate, there are lots of different forms, but many of them rely on the ability to enter the information and using keyboarding skills as a part of that. And so we have that as kind of a foundational skill that is an access point to technology. And then really thinking about how to use technology as a collaboration tool and a way to connect. And so, you know, we have kids that may not be sitting, you know, side by side, but might be communicating remotely. And again, that's the world of work these days, that people are connecting with people in other countries and work. And so those skills will help them and serve them throughout their lives. And then we mentioned also the idea of communication and presenting to different types of audiences and how to use tools to most effectively do that. So in our schools, as I mentioned, these areas are really integrated into our core content areas, and so kids are making use of technology to gather information about content, to present it, to put it into different forms, to process it, to make sense of it. They use the standards and the skills continuum and proficiency scales to help that. And then there are materials. So we have lots of resources that are built into kind of the standard core of software on students' devices. At the elementary school, those might be on a cart. And then as they move into middle and high school, those would be one-to-one devices. But lots of really rich, wonderful resources that are kind of built in, that everybody has access to. And then we also have opportunities where by school or classroom, there might be places where schools are using software that they identified around for needs.
Mike, one thing to add before you go on from elementary, just as a reminder.
Fifth grade.
Our current ratio for grades 3 to 5 is a 2-to-1, but with the passage of the capital tech levy, or the capital projects levy, we'll be able to move to 1-to-1 in 5th grade. It won't be a take-home model like it is for 6-12, but we've been hearing for years and years from elementary staff that the current ratio isn't sufficient as we become more reliant on technology. So having a 1-to-1 for grade 5 will be implemented since we passed the levy.
And benefits of that both in terms of the students using the devices and then also the flexibility that gives to grades K-4. So lots of good options for that as we move forward. And then at middle school, where we do have one-to-one, and as you walk into classes, you will see devices in most classes where students are working in all the ways we described in the standards on those devices, using the software tools that are available to them on, but teachers really skillfully and artfully incorporating technology into their curricula, both to access information, to process information, to communicate information, and to collaborate. You'll see all of that in classrooms throughout our middle schools. And then there are classes and courses and content that really help students to then expand and build on that, that integration that I was talking about. So again, wonderful elective options in our middle schools. It's the technology part of STEM in many cases, but also very specific technology related courses that not only serve kids in middle school, but then really do a nice job of building to options in the high school level. And so many of these courses you'll see kind of the second tier and third tier of options as students move through pathways from middle school to high school. And you'll see those in the electives when we show you those for high school. And so high school, again, integrated into the core content, but elective options as well. And then again, rich software resources for students to be using, as well as for teachers to use to deliver instruction, and one-to-one, as we mentioned before. And then again, as I was describing for middle school, some really amazing technology options for students that really are more than just the kind of the standard get on a computer and do something. These are the types of things that people will be doing out in the world of work. And so it's more than, like I said, just kind of the basics of technology. As you can see up there, things kids are doing engineering, they're doing startups, they're doing digital production, and at a level in many cases as you would see in the world of work and in careers. And so really that's a testament to the building of those skills from elementary and then into middle, and then having those pathways that go from middle to high school. Those have been intentionally built, and so they really are a testament to the work of our staff and students. We also have, as we think about that, if we're going to have technology across our system, we have to have ways to support it. And so we have a really wonderful support structure in our system for technology integration. We have technology integration facilitators. Those are teachers in each building that are actually there as a support structure for schools. They do combinations of training, so they will help teachers to understand how to integrate technology using the tech skills continuum. They're a support structure. They're leaders and innovators in their school too. They're models of what good digital integration looks like. We also have a rich resource online through PowerSchool Learning called Knowledge Base for Integrating Technology, or KIT, that has just amazing resources, not only for how to integrate technology, but all the curriculum resources that have digital components are built into that as well, and then strategies for how to use them. So that's an extensive resource that teachers can always go to at any time to find out how to use technology across our curriculum. And then our professional learning department and our technology integration facilitators lead professional learning around technology integration and have rich resources and tools to help teachers with that. It's also part of our Educator Induction Academy to make sure that people coming into our system know that this is an expectation and part of the way we do business. And so we get our new teachers right from the beginning. And so I mentioned the technology integration program. We actually do have staff assigned to thinking about and leading the work around technology integration. All of our departments in our 3 divisions think about technology integration, and we have some people in the Student Academic Success Services division, Associate Director of Technology Integration, Mindy Mallon, and 4 technology integration specialists who work with folks to do these things, to think about how do we get our technology integration facilitators trained and prepped, to think about how do we support people through those resources I mentioned. So they really are kind of the lead for that, and then wonderful people in each building as well. I mentioned a little bit about KIT before. You can kind of see the structure of it here. Again, lots of resources there. And talked about professional learning. Again, these are resources that are available. And as we move to a PLMS, which an online way of delivering technology, which is wonderful because that's what we're using and we want to implement, we'll be able to build in some of those types of training opportunities through a professional learning management system that's coming online over the next couple of years. So teachers will actually be able to go online to get training to learn how to use digital technology. And we can use people that we already have in the system to help support that. But even so, we currently have almost 1,000 people who have been participating in training for technology. And so we see adding a technology element to that can really help us expand even further. We also don't want to forget that parents are side by side with our kids, and if parents are informed users of technology, their children will be better users of technology. And so we have resources on our website, a parent guide for using technology in the classroom, how to access PowerSchool Learning, provides an overview of our approach to technology in our system. And then we also do have some level of monitoring. As I mentioned, we are monitoring how many of our teachers are using and participating in professional development as a way to check to see needs and what skills that our teachers have. And you can kind of see some of the courses that have been offering for that and some of the data we have on that. And so that is information communication technology.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have a quick question, and none of us may have the answer to this. In our math classes, are any of the teachers using Excel for formulas? Because I see my college-age son using Excel all the time. You don't even need a calculator anymore. I have no idea how it works.
Yeah, math and science and many of the electives that we talked about, there's that. And then there's also tools built into the digital curriculum that we have for math and science that do many of the same things that Excel might do and more. So one is a way to actually analyze and make sense of the data and process it, but also a way to understand the concepts too.
Any other questions? Any follow-up? All right, well, thank you very much. It's great to see what's going on and how that all plays out and the strength of the electives and being able to support these activities.
Thanks.
And with that, we can move on to any board member comments. All right, then from there, we can move. Before I say that, our upcoming board meeting schedule. As you all know, we have an extended study session this weekend from March 23rd to the 25th. And then April 16th will be the joint study session with Redmond City Council, starting at 5, with a board meeting following that at 7 p.m. here. Yes?
Quick question, when do we think we'll have a more detailed agenda for the extended work session?
We have it, and
I saw an earlier one that was, sketchy, but I didn't know. Have I missed it someplace?
I'm trying to remember if I sent it to you last week, but
I
maybe
didn't
But we
see
can
it.
easily
just
resend
sent
it.
Yes.
I didn't see it. is my
Okay,
point.
yeah,
Thanks.
so we'll get it to you. Okay, we'll get
So
it to the
tonight.
board.
Or tomorrow, you'll be seeing it. And then we'll have the actual set for Friday. I did send out an email earlier in regards to Friday night, so that you could be aware. That was sort of, there's a good handbook in there that gives the overview of the policy governance work with summative evaluation. So I would encourage you to read that first before going through the other information, because I think it provides some good guidance of how to be able to summarize this work that we will do Friday night. All right, anything else for board member comments?
Just one thing, while we were sitting here, we got an email from an interested citizen about the dyslexia bill has been signed by the governor. Hallelujah. So we were talking about that just a couple of weeks ago. And
We were talking about it just earlier today,
Yep.
so yes.
So it would be great at some point in time, in a board brief, to have an update as to what that does. We were also able to provide some of that dyslexia information that Lake Washington is doing to those representatives in the process of doing that. So thank you to staff for being on that and being able to get that back to them in a timely fashion. Okay, anything else? Okay, and with that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.